question is, what, in Mohammed Hijab's opinion, what is the logical conclusion of feminism if it continues to go on? Like you spoke about third wave feminism and how it incorporated minority rights, etc., etc.
Yeah, so what the argument I was making, the reason why I was thinking about writing a book on second wave, but then I realized that has already been done by disbelievers, right? So وَكَفَ اللَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْقِتَالَ, as the Quran says. Allah has spared the Muslims from having to do the fighting. Like, for example, some really prominent books, The Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell, and the other
Red
book,
Pill guys use that a lot.
yeah, it's a good book, to be honest. Another one, which is The Miseducation of Women by James Tooley. These kinds of ways, this is a whole category now referred to as backlash literature, second wave feminism. So the job had been done. I thought, okay, well, there hadn't really been a response in the same kind of way to third wave feminism. And what differentiates second and third wave is really intersectionality, or the idea what Kimberly Crenshaw referred to as intersectionality. So what the argument I was making is that basically, if in the 70s and 80s, when black feminism became quite popular, Audre Lorde and bell hooks and all these, they started to add layers of markers of prioritization. So, for example, before it was just men versus, in a very dualistic way, men versus women.
Yeah.
But then they started adding layers, like for instance, the layer of race, the layer of sexual identity, the layer of, and these are actually the big three: sexual identity, race, and gender. Yeah. But then, if we take this to its logical extreme, there's no reason for us not to have all other layers like religion, tribe, disability, all these things. Because if the moment intersectionalists start saying, well, this one is preferred and this one is not, then what they're doing is imposing a colonial narrative from a privileged position, which they would not and could not do. And so what I said is that, say, for example, you have a situation where you have these layers of identification. If they're prioritized to a point where someone can say, well, gender is not important at all, so they deprioritize gender to or hierarchize it to the bottom, then that means it implodes the feminist idea. Like, no longer is feminism necessary, or gender-based discussions about men and women.
Yeah.
Because now the prioritizer, or the subject of investigation, say, or the person who's prioritizing the indicators or the identity markers has decided not to include gender, which should be in their right to do, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying that if someone does that with Islam, for instance, puts Islam at the top, so it's conceivable that someone can put Islam at the top of the intersectionalist hierarchy, right? And from that angle, still maintain, in other words, it can be consistent with their framework.
Interesting.
Yeah, it'll be consistent with their framework because they're putting Islam at the top, and they have full right to do that because who decides what is to be put at the top. So in that sense, it's not a contradiction. You can be you can work within that framework, but then what that would indicate is the self-implosion of feminism, because no longer is feminism required in order to sort out gender relations. So the point of the matter is, if intersectionality is what is being espoused, then the question is, who is responsible for the hierarchization of the identity markers? If we say that the person who is responsible should be the person who is the subject, the subject themselves. So if you go to sub-Saharan Africa, they will have a different prioritization than someone in Western Europe, because for them, tribe might be more important. Like, for example, they'll put tribe as more important than gender and race, for instance, right? If
you can imagine them doing that.
Yeah, so that could be the case, yeah. So in that case, why is feminism even relevant to these people? Why should we force these people who consider tribe to be the most important to consider gender to be the most important? Because therein lies the colonial aspect of feminism, that women in the West basically are telling women in
that's crystal clear. That's
sub-Saharan Africa what to do, or what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. Why should, for example, a white Western or even a black, feminist in the West go to an Amish woman or go to a ultra Orthodox Jewish woman and tell her, in fact, what you should be thinking about is being a woman first and then a Jew second? Her saying that to her is a colonial aspect of her ideology.
It's imperial feminism.
Yeah, that's imperial. They actually refer to it as colonial feminism. So what I'm saying is that if you leave it to women to, if basically what you want is female self-expression, or let's call it self-expression, because now what the question of who is what isn't, how is female anyway in the first place, and who should be described as that. The self-expression of subjects. Let's just keep it completely neutral, because a third wave would want that. Yeah, self-expression of neutral of subjects. Then they decide. Then therefore, what they should prioritize or not. So for me right now, as a Muslim, where I'm deciding to prioritize Islam as number one, okay, and I completely deprioritize this aspect of gender based on their criterion. I'm actually working within their framework.
That's very interesting.
So, but what that does is it implodes their framework and it makes it superfluous. So this means that the whole feminism is no longer needed.
I've never heard it explained like that. That's very interesting, because that shows their selectiveness in terms of what are the more important values that you prioritize over the others. Yeah,
who gets to decide that? Because this is, I think, I've tried this argument with so many feminists.
What's the reply?
There is no reply. They have to agree. I've gotten the most agreement from this than anything else I've said to feminists.
That's very interesting.
And so the thing is, because it's true. Like, they can't say no, but we should. You'd have to go into a second wave framework now. But the question is, why should we go to a second wave framework? Why should we now they have to argue for the primacy, okay, of gender-based discussion based on like liberal feminist frameworks, which then there's a whole privilege discussion there and power discussion, which they are so averse to.
I think you need to. Did you write about this?
Yeah, that's in the book. That's the argument. Before you read my book, brother.
No. You've got a very hard writing, man.
No, man. I just
you
explained
just
it
simplify
now.
it. You just
explain
simplify
it to the people. They all understand it.